You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. Join us as we explore tools, practices, meditations, and conversations with the members of the UK community. Together, we will discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Hello, everybody. My name is Sebastian Calmes. I'm a wellness specialist with University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient Conversations. On the episode with me today is Dr. George Wright, and we're going to be discussing the topic of personal purpose so that we may thrive more at work and at home. Dr. Wright, thank you for being on the show with me today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Would you mind telling me about your background?
I'm George Carlton Wright. I'm a native of Lexington, Kentucky. I grew up here in Lexington, attended the public schools here in Lexington. I graduated from Lafayette High School, and in 1968, I enrolled here at the University of Kentucky. Right from the start, you talk about purpose. I loved history, geography, sociology, those type of things. And I knew that I would be majoring in something like that. And I was an undergraduate history major. I received my bachelor's degree in history, and at that time, I thought most about being a school teacher. A school teacher to me meant teaching in high school. But at some point, by the time I was a junior, I suspect, I met some of my professors outside of class, and I said, gosh, how does one become a college professor? I remained at UK and received my master's degree. I graduated in 1972 with my bachelor's degree, and I enrolled immediately in the master's program. I found that to be a very exciting, a very exhilarating experience. I read so much in so many different areas of history. I had to do some research papers, and I learned more about how to do research. I even learned how to write better, though I will say to anyone, writing for me is a chore, a learning process. At some point, both my professors and I expressed interest in my going for the PhD degree, and I had said to them, I think I would be interested in teaching here at the University of Kentucky. I thought that there was enough topics, especially on race, broadly speaking, in Kentucky that needed to be explored. So I thought I could do that. Several of them said that a university, whenever they're recruiting for a new position, always wants to hire the best person. They probably want to make sure they have people who've had many different experiences, people from all over the country and in some instances from all over the world. They suggested it might be good to consider going somewhere else for the PhD program if I wanted to teach here at the University of Kentucky. We made a list of the places that we thought that, given my interest in race relations, in Southern history, in American history, were the best places. Long story short, my professors wrote recommendations for me, and Duke University offered me the best fellowship, so I go to Duke. And Duke was truly better than advertised. I enjoyed every moment of being at Duke University, and I met so many different professors. What I discovered is that while you might say someone is a conservative, ideologically is a liberal or radical, you can learn from all of them. That it's good if all of them challenge you in that sense. I tried to take classes from people. It did not matter what I thought their philosophical views were. I received encouragement at Duke that helped me to become a professor. I hope I said in a humble way, I would become Duke University's first Black American to receive a PhD from Duke. And according to the history department, it takes 4 years to receive a PhD from Duke. But one of the things about me, I've always been in a rush with life. I received the PhD from Duke in 3 years. I love telling people I'm not Duke's smartest, but I might have been Duke's quickest in that sense. I would be the one of the cohort that Duke eventually hires back. Years later, Duke would offer me an endowed chair. I would even be a professor at Duke. But after finishing my degree at Duke, the only job I wanted, period, was teaching at the University of Kentucky because, as I mentioned, I wanted to do research on race in Kentucky, plus my wife, who I had married while we were both undergraduates here, Valerie Annette Ellison. We married before the start of our junior year. She would receive her degree in journalism from here, and she would go on to have an outstanding career, and she is in the University of Kentucky's Journalism Hall of Fame for her own work over the years. She had family here. I had family here. We had personal reasons why we wanted to come back to Lexington. So we come back to Lexington, the University of Kentucky's history department. It just all fell perfect because, first of all, they have to have an opening in something where you qualify for, and they did. They hired me. In the fall of 1977, I'm a beginning history professor here at UK. I assumed I was going to be at the University of Kentucky for the rest of my life. That's how I thought about it. But as it turned out, by the time I'm in my third year, there are other universities making overtures to me, even though I had not accomplished all the things that an assistant professor needs to accomplish to be promoted to the next level. One of those schools turned out to be the University of Texas at Austin. The University of Texas at Austin always had an outstanding reputation. Believe it or not, the tipping point in my going to the University of Texas was that the history department here very much wanted me to stay after Texas had made me an offer. And they said, you know what, the president here, Otis Singletary, taught at the University of Texas. We're going to work it out so you can go have a conversation with him, and he'll tell you, sure, the University of Texas is great, but you stay right here at the University of Kentucky. So I, probably in March 1980, have a meeting with the president of the University of Kentucky. Now, I'm a lowly assistant professor. You don't go and meet with the president back then. I go and meet Otis Singletary. I'm awestruck. I had read his book on the Negro militia during Reconstruction. So I'm talking to him, and he says, the University of Texas has made you a job offer. I said, yes, sir. We talked some more about my interest. And he said, I taught at the University of Texas. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I won teaching awards there. And then Lyndon Johnson asked me to go to Washington with him. This is impressive. I said, but you know what, sir? Even though the University of Texas has made me this offer, I'm going to stay here because I love the University of Kentucky, and the University of Kentucky loves me. Otis Singletary says, the University of Kentucky will love you even more if you go to Texas. I said, what? He says, yes. He says, there's something about you're being a homegrown person. You go out there and be very successful. It'll tie you to Kentucky all the more. That was enough. From that point until his passing, probably 20 years later, every time I came back to Lexington, which was at least once, if not twice a year, I would go over to Dr. Singletary's house, and we would have dinner, lunch, or breakfast, always bad food, things that we should not be eating. We would laugh, we would enjoy, and I would soak it all in. Otis Singletary is one of the most remarkable human beings I've met in this profession, and I learned a great deal from him. I could go on, but I go to the University of Texas, and I meet any number of people there, one of them being the president of the University of Texas, a man named Bill Cunningham, who takes me under his wings. And this is a huge university. He takes me under his wings, and it's largely through Bill Cunningham that I become the director of Afro-American Studies at the University of Texas. And then he makes me part of his cabinet. I become an associate provost. I'm working directly to the provost, but I'm part of the president's cabinet. And I get to sit in on the meetings with the president. I wasn't making the decisions, but I saw how decisions were made. At some point along the line, Kentucky makes me the offer that I had always hoped that Kentucky would. In 1989, Kentucky makes me the offer to come back and become the vice president of what is essentially the Office of Diversity today, as well as being a professor. I'm excited about it. I want to say yes to that. As fate would have it, while I'm thinking about it, I was giving a presentation in Berlin, Germany. I've told Kentucky I will make my decision when I get back. I come back, I go to class for the first time, and halfway through my lecture, the president of the university, the provost, my dean, my department chair, all come in and tell me that I have won the University of Texas at Austin's single highest teaching award. But earlier that day, I had contacted Kentucky and said I had accepted their offer and I was resigning from UT Austin. There would be a press release done saying that George Wright is coming back to Kentucky. Bill Cunningham, my mentor, meets with me over the weekend and he says, George, you need to stay here at Texas for now. Otis Singletary had told me what to do many years earlier. Bill Cunningham is telling me to stay. I stay in that regard. Jump ahead 3 years later, Duke University makes me an offer of an endowed professorship and so forth. I talk to Bill Cunningham, and Bill Cunningham says, take the Duke offer. You have to take that. That's the right kind of offer. You have to leave, but understand you're really going to be on loan to Duke. I'm going to come there at a certain point and bring you back to Texas. And 3 years later, he comes and tells me that he wants me to be the interim provost at the University of Texas at Arlington. He had become the chancellor of the whole 9 University of Texas schools. So I go to the University of Texas at Arlington for 1 year. I so like being there with Cunningham being my boss back in Austin and working with these other folk that I resigned from Duke and I become provost and executive vice president at the University of Texas at Arlington. And I would be in that position for 8 years. Then 8 years later, I become president. One of the things I had always said was that, you know what, at some point, I want to be affiliated with a historically black school. And so A&M offers me the presidency of Prairie View A&M, and I become president there for 14 years. It was a truly wonderful experience. The thing I love telling people is that my last interview, before they made their selection, several of the people said, you've never been affiliated with a historically black school. Do you really know much about them? And I said, hey, I've been black all my life. I know everything about this kind of school. I've done this, I've done that. I become president. I'm in my office one day after I've been there 3 months, and I said, I don't know anything about this place. My goodness, learning process. It was educational for me. And I tell folk, I sure hope people benefited from my being there, because I sure benefited from being there. That I probably learned far more than I gave. So that's my background.
A big theme seems like mentors. Mm-hmm. Otis Singletary and then Bill Cunningham. Mm-hmm. Are these people that helped shape your direction, your purpose? Or Before you even met Otis Singletary, did you already have a strong idea of your direction of where you wanted to go?
Going back to elementary school, it's in the 4th grade where we were exposed to different cultures around the world, really in geography and in history. We read about people who lived in Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and so forth. We also read about people like Ferdinand Magellan and Christopher Columbus and all these folk who navigated the globe, people who are willing to go out of their comfort zone. And I said, wow, that was fascinating to me, that reading becomes it. And it's through reading that I developed my purpose, that I said, I think I'm a pretty good storyteller. One of my elementary school teachers was one of the early Black undergraduates here at UK, and a year or so ago, President Capilouto had a luncheon for her. She said George was always trying to take over the class and tell stories to my fellow classmates about history and things like that. So I always said, I think I could become a teacher. I liked helping people understand how complicated issues were. It would be good if all the good people were over here and all the bad people were over here. Then you know what you do. You go over there with all the good people. But it's more complicated than that. And issues are so intertwined and so forth. Reading becomes my bedrock. And reading then helps me come up with my purpose early on. That I wanted to somehow be a teacher of some type. At the same time, I thought I could bring people together. Not surprisingly, people differ. What I discovered very early on, there's probably some point that we agree on. Why don't we take that agreement point and make that what we deal with most instead of the things that we disagree with most? So you see, that works in religion, that works in race, that works with almost anything. That we probably do agree on this, we may not agree on that, or so we think we don't agree in that sense. I think that's what becomes for me very clear. The idea of having goals just resonated with me. I love the idea of saying, when I get up today, I'm going to do A, B, C, D. In any given day, I want to have, and this goes back to my childhood, more things I have in mind that I want to do than I can actually accomplish. I don't think in my life I've ever said what I hear people say. What are you doing? Nothing. Nothing. I'm always doing something. You see, even if I was watching television, that's something. But if I'm watching television, it's because I think I can learn something from this baseball game. Or I can learn something from this show or whatever. Nothing is something that is not part of it for me. Reading helped me to develop goals, and then these people I met later on who were very successful showed me that if you work towards your goals, and then if you look in any area, take entertainment, take anything, the people who are successful work hard. Sure, someone who is an outstanding singer probably has a very good voice for singing. Someone who's an outstanding basketball player probably has certain attributes to go with that. But they work hard more than anything. What I decided in life was that I would always work hard. Nobody to this day has ever said George Wright was lazy. They may say he's cantankerous. That's a difference. They may say he doesn't want to do that, but they never said he's too lazy to sweep the floor or too lazy for that. I'm always going to do it. In fact, anything I got to do, guess what? I'm going to hurry up and do it. In that sense, I love telling people, if you have your income taxes that are due April the 15th, why don't you do them in January? Why would you wait till April? That's how I feel about everything. You set a goal, you get it done, you check it off.
Proactive.
And bear in mind, the longer you live, you also realize there's a lot of things that's going to get in your way. You cannot control the weather. I was in graduate school at UK. My wife is a reporter for the Louisville Times. This is April 1974. We're living in Louisville. I'm typing up my research paper that's due in a couple of days. I'm doing plenty of time. The lights go out. The power goes out. I'm mad, of course, and my wife somehow knew to go to work. And she comes back later and she says, tornado had come through that part of Louisville and had wiped out people's homes and subdivisions and all sorts of things, tragedies. People had died and so forth. I can't do my work. I can't drive from Louisville to Lexington if the road is closed. There are things that are going to prevent you, but why not control everything that you can control? To say that you won't have things that come in, health conditions, all sorts of things. Can you imagine how many plans COVID changed in people's lives and things like that? If possible, you set a goal, you work toward it.
It sounds like from reading, you discovered something you are good at and you really enjoy. Reading was a lifting off point for teaching and telling stories, as you were saying. Mm-hmm. Did you use goals as a vehicle for that purpose? If your purpose is to tell stories and teach and find the points that people connect on, was your strategy to set goals to fulfill that purpose?
Okay. I hope this explains it. At some point, my personal life and my professional ambitions come together, and it's around race. I was born into a world where racial segregation existed. I was born in 1950. Much of Lexington, Kentucky, the South, and so forth, segregation was real. But the world was changing. This is after World War II. 1949, court decision had integrated the University of Kentucky. 1950, the two major college desegregation cases, University of Texas, University of Oklahoma. 4 years later, the Brown decision on public school. So the world is changing in that regard, and I'm thrown into the middle of this. I have to learn how to navigate that. I am a black person. That's what black folk told me all the time. I didn't interact much with white people back then. They, in many ways, wanted to protect me. Their protection in some ways was not venturing out, but I wanted to venture out in other ways. I think reading showed me what race had been like, the negative parts, but I also read about some inspirational things as well, where there had been breakthroughs. I discovered there were people who were white who were just as committed to having equal opportunities as we were. Ironically, I decided I would find a way to link hands with the black folk and the white folk. I wanted everybody to know what it had been like, but I also wanted folk to know the possibilities. For most of my life, people have said I am, quote, naive. Now, once after a very ugly racial incident happened at the University of Texas, a young black woman in her anger said in front of my class of 200, George Wright, you're too damn naive. I'm 40 years old. She's 19. My feelings were hurt. I didn't know what to say. But I said, Lord, she's telling the truth. If naive means that I believe the best in people, that people can overcome where they are. If you can make a difference, then I am naive. I know what the real world is like, but I refuse to let what's happening hinder me. I've written a book on racial violence in Kentucky. I can show you some of the most horrendous episodes that are possible, but I conclude my book by saying those things no longer happen. Those days have ended. We need to know about it, Just like when I went to the Nazi concentration camp, when I went to Dachau, it says we must never forget. But it then didn't say we should be extracting our revenge. It said we must never forget, but we need to move forward. So that's what it is with me. I refuse to be down about anything. Everything to me goes back to these things I read and these inspirational things of these people in the past who somehow refuse to allow themselves to remain in that situation. I saw somewhere something that said, I used to cry because I had no shoes. Then I met a man who had no feet. Oh, my goodness. Now think about that. I want shoes, but there are folk worse off than me in that regard. When I go into a classroom here at the University of Kentucky, I just say to my students, you all aren't smiling. Aren't you glad to see me? I'm so glad to see you. I don't know what to do. I said, look at the age I'm still teaching. Lord, I keep waiting for them to come and grab me and take me out of here. I said, aren't y'all happy to be in here with me? And they're looking at me like, what's wrong with him? And I'll start talking to them and just say, when I was a student, I know how difficult it is. I know how uncertain it is to not know what you're going to be doing and all those other things. But enjoy this moment too. Find something about being here that you just say, this is incredible opportunity, because most 18-year-olds are not sitting in a classroom at the University of Kentucky. They just are not.
Do you think that some of those students don't have their why for sitting in that room, and therefore it's harder to find something to be joyous about?
I can't believe you just said what you said, because I love asking people why. Now, what's fascinating about that, you'd be surprised how upset people can become with you. If somebody says to me, first of all, it should be obvious to my students that I so love and appreciate the University of Kentucky because of the opportunities I've had. But I'll ask them, why are you here at the University of Kentucky? Why are you here? You mean you can't answer that? If I ever see somebody wearing anything that suggests that they are of a certain political persuasion, I just say, why? I didn't say you shouldn't be. I just said, why? I've asked myself most of my life, why? Why do I go to church and stay all day? Why? That's what reading did for me. But I think you're right. I think a lot of times we are doing things, and it's okay that maybe we're doing it because our parents or our mentors told us to do it. You need to go to school. You need to get an education. They may say you need to go to the Army. You may need to do anything. They're correct. But you need to understand why. When I was the president at Prairie View, we, like all other universities, would often have disciplinary issues. At a certain point, we had students involved in hazing. Essentially, these people were going to be kicked out of Prairie View, and sometimes even more than that. Before that happened, I wanted to meet with those persons, and I would ask them why. And I just wanted them to say, I think the hazing laws are dumb, or say something, and they would say, I don't know. And I said, no, tell me why. He told me to do it. I said, no. I said, you know what? All my life, I've got in trouble for having a big mouth. But nobody ever made me say it. I said it on my own. I said, I never did something because someone else told me to do it. I had it may have been a bad reason, but I had a reason. Once you figure out the why in your life,
then purpose starts to uncover more. Are you suggesting that we investigate? We ask why. Why do you go to church and stay? Why am I in this class right now? Mm-hmm. Why am I recording this podcast with you right now? Mm-hmm. You're encouraging me and everybody else to investigate why. Right. And that can be done through reading or being open enough to learn something from people that have differing political views or philosophies, which suggests a level of vulnerability too. Mm-hmm. It does require vulnerability to ask why, and then some courage to even investigate.
Yeah. Let me share this with you. My wife and I have been very fortunate that we've now been able to go to all 7 continents, and we've been able to go to many places. The reason why for me is that I love to go to cultures that on the surface seem different than mine, that their main diet is different than mine, what seems to be their religion and other things. And I like to look at them and I can find the commonality. I'm not taking anything away from the uniqueness of other people, but I want to understand other people's religions. I want to understand other people's views of the relationships between men and women and so on down the line. That to me is what's been one of the best things about my life, is that I've had the opportunity to do that. When in the 1980s, when I'm at the University of Texas, they had this huge debate. They called it on multicultural education. Today we call it diversity. There were some people who said we don't need to learn anymore about dead white Europeans. That's what they said. Okay, you don't need to learn about Shakespeare or things like that. I still said, no, why can't I learn about Shakespeare, but also learn about this? Learning about Shakespeare doesn't mean that I can't learn about something else. I can benefit from learning about European culture, Asian culture, Islamic religion, Jewish religion. It does mean I am vulnerable. Learning about people, exploring the world, has been so important. That's what I encourage everyone to do.
Do you think that people that have, in quotes, easy lives have a harder time finding a personal purpose in their life?
I don't know that I could say that. Here's something. When I came to college, against the backdrop of the black experience that I had, I thought all white people had it made. I didn't realize, of course I learned, that there were white people who came from backgrounds that were very similar to mine. They could come from a single parent background. They could come from backgrounds where people had been incarcerated. They could come from all sorts of things. Then I met some people who came from relatively well-to-do backgrounds, and I'm not so sure they didn't have their challenges. You see, when I became a professor, I met some people who had a PhD, and they were considered the person who had been the least successful in their family. My goodness, you got a PhD from Yale? Yeah, but my brother is a physicist or is an MD or something like that. There can be challenges on all of us. And again, what is your goals in life? How successful are you in reaching your goals? I think it's important for none of us to let other people define for us what constitutes success. Therefore, you could be a 4th grade teacher for 45 years and be successful. You could be a wide range of things you could be an athlete and be successful. A part of being successful is, do you help other people be successful? Everybody who tells me they want to be something that's in any way close to what I am, a writer of books, an administrator, a professor, I quickly tell them yes, and you'll probably do this better than I can because you're smarter than me. I tell all my students that. And I tell folk that, yes, you are going to go further than me. If nothing else, you had me as your teacher, so I know you're going to go further than me. In that regard, I'm supposed to encourage people. Singletary told me you're going to have the stomach of a goat to be a college professor. You're going to have to take everything. Bill Cunningham said to me, you're going to always have to take the high road. When people say something ugly to you, George Wright, I don't care what your instinct is, you've got to take it.
I heard this quote the other day, and it was something along the lines of, there is nothing more in abundance than talented, intelligent, unsuccessful people. I think the point of the quote is that talent is not the sole determinant of success. And of course, we determine what success is for us. In your experience, is there something that pushed you to reach your goals, to be successful, to reach your definition of success, even if you weren't the smartest, fastest, or wisest person in the room? What was that?
Okay. I will share this with you. When I first set a goal to become a teacher, I thought about it primarily in the context of disseminating information to my students, lecturing to them on various things. But at the universities where I was a professor, I discovered the reason so many people don't make it through the PhD program. It's not that they don't have the ability. They just can't make themselves do all the work that is required. And you have to do it day in and day out. And here's my example with my PhD dissertation, but with the books I've written. It starts out for me with a 5x8 note card. My first book was on blacks in Louisville. Why am I going to write about blacks in Louisville? Well, what is important about that? Well, Louisville is in a border state. Kentucky was a place that was badly divided during the Civil War. It was neither 100% Confederacy, 100% Union. Slavery was greatly divided. There are reasons why it could be interesting. It meant I would have to do all this research. From that one note card to do my dissertation, I probably had 800 note cards. And I've got to put them in all sorts of areas. Then I've got to write, and then I keep asking why and analyze.
Did the note cards have single questions on them?
Yes, it would just have one point on each one of those. I've got to put them all in order. It means that I've got to work at it every day. I love music. I love all sorts of music. I bet you every one of them started with one single tune or one single thought.
Idea.
And something like that. And they've got to do all sorts of things to make that come in. And they probably have a garbage can full of stuff they threw away that they didn't use. You have to work at it, and you have to work at it. And for me, it's a lonely process. I've written my book probably 6 or 7 times. Nobody has seen all of those. It requires a lot of work to be successful. So here's what I decided. You have to first satisfy yourself. If I can satisfy myself, then it's likely other people, maybe not everyone, will see the value of it. Since I've worked on blacks in Louisville, I know whether I answered the questions. I know whether it was consistent with the other literature, and I know where I've broken new ground. That I've said something that other folk have said. I'm in a room by myself, and I say, wow, I can't believe I just thought of this. This is incredible. And you'll be looking at me like, please, give me a break. I say, no, you never heard anybody else say that before about this idea. This is important. That to me is important. I wanted to make a living from the jobs that I had. Early in my life, I was motivated by making a certain income. But I knew deep down inside, wouldn't it be great if I ever got to the point where the amount of money I made or had didn't matter? Wouldn't that be nice? Trust me, I'm far from being a millionaire in that regard. But I eventually reached a point where I could decide on a job or I could decide on anything, and money was not the primary factor. It was whether I thought this was a good opportunity and whether I could make a contribution. I know this is being taped, but I tell folk all the time, the University of Kentucky doesn't realize it. I would pay them to work here. My goodness. I love this job and this opportunity so much. I want to do this work because to me it's important. It gets me up every day. And when folk tell me I've made a difference in their lives and I've helped them do this, that's what I want to do. There's many different ways you can measure it, but clearly you've got to produce the product that you set out. You have to be pleased with it. When I look back on the 3 books that I've written, and I'm about to finish a 4th book now, I am so pleased with them. I didn't say the whole world was pleased with those books, but I think I exhausted everything I had in doing that. If you are familiar with the runner Usain Bolt, who won 3 straight times in 3 different Olympics, 3 different events. And I think he set a world's record every time. Suppose you just so happen to come along at the same time as Usain Bolt, okay? Your best is never going to beat his best, right? His best is just that. But suppose, for whatever reason, you were in the finals of the Olympics and he didn't run his best, and your best would have beaten the time he came in that day. But you didn't run your best. That's what you want to do. You want to do your best every time. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. But you want to look back and say, you know what? I finished second every time to Usain Bolt, but I set a world's record too if his hadn't been already a world's record. I exceeded my best every time.
Success was determined by doing your best. Can you tell me about values and how that relates to purpose and goals?
Okay. When I think of values, I think we're supposed to treat other people the way we want to be treated. It's very simple to me, that you want to treat people with respect and dignity in all instances. In some instances, it means there are times where you might think somebody might have not treated you the way they should have, that you probably should try to take the higher road and maybe treat them a little bit better than they probably deserve in hopes of bringing about something different. My mother told me a long time ago to never tell a lie. Of course, we all know that. But I think in all sorts of situations in life, no matter where you are, to not tell the whole truth or to leave something out might sound like the more expedient way to handle something. As a college administrator, I was determined I would never lie to the people above me or the people who reported to me. There were instances that the people above me were very unhappy with something that happened or something I did. There were instances of when that meeting ended, I didn't know what that was going to lead to the next day. I think in every instance, it led to a continuation of the relationship. It didn't mean they were happy with me. There's such a thing as being honest, but you don't have to be brutally honest or cruelly honest. I think you should try to maintain people's dignity in that regard. I stand by the fact that just because I, as an African American, experienced discrimination doesn't mean other people have not. I'm convinced that in the world that I lived in and the circles that I've traveled in, women have been discriminated more than I have been discriminated against. I found that out very clear in graduate school and as a young professor. My lifelong things has been to champion the rights of women, because it will be placed on you in such a way as if you are the problem. A lot of times you can be blamed when you are the victim in that regard. I've really tried to make sure women have received every opportunity. I've told many a women's group, you all do know I'm one of you, right? Look at me like, no, there's nothing about you that looks like us. And I says, exactly. But it doesn't mean my heart isn't committed to being there. If you tell me somebody is an outcast or somebody is not to be treated like the rest of us, I'm jumping over there with them. I'm going to be sitting over there with them. I would rather not be at the table with us. I'd rather be over there at the table with them because I know what it's like. I think anybody who has been successful, at least in a university environment, you better have a level of humility. You best know that, first of all, if you think you're the smartest person in that room, wrong. No, you're not the smartest person in that room or the smartest on this or that. You ought to be thankful that you're in that position. There's something that's going to happen that's going to humble you in that job. You've got to have humility in these jobs. I hope I've done that and not been arrogant. So you ought to be thankful. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do the job and be bold and all those other things. But again, humility is something that you've got to have. Another measure of success is to know when the time has come for you to no longer be in that position. You have to know that if you've accomplished all sorts of things, or that at a certain point there are certain things you're not able to accomplish, that somebody else can get that boulder over the hill.
If there was one piece of advice that you would give to somebody, what would you want to tell them?
I think you have got to find a way to listen to people who are disagreeing with you or bringing criticisms. Part of the challenge could be people who are not interested in your well-being or you being successful. That's possible. Okay. In other instances, there could be people who work very closely with you, who are very committed to you, who fundamentally think that what you're about to do here is a mistake. And you've got to find a way to listen to them, to hear what other people say. Even those folk who are not interested in your best interest could be right on certain things. And you've got to somehow discern when that's the case. I hope I learned to be able to hear what people said to me. So I would say that to anyone. If you can't listen to other people, you will err. You may not err on everything, but on something really important, you're going to err.
Dr. Wright, thank you for being on Becoming Wildly Resilient today, and I appreciate you, your wisdom, and your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient. This podcast is brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. We offer a wide range of online and in-person services to support the well-being of UK employees, retirees, and their spouses. You can find experts in mental health, personal resilience, nutrition, and physical activity. We're ready to meet you where you are and address your unique needs. To learn more about the work, life, and well-being services offered by UK Human Resources, visit hr.uky.edu/wellbeing. You can also connect with us on social media and YouTube by searching @UKY Wellness or by email at healthandwellness@uky.edu.